Good afternoon, welcome to GrainTV. My name's Cody Bills. Today is Thursday the 11th, one day after the WASDE report. We'll talk about export sales that came out this morning. We'll also talk a little bit about ethanol production, which came out yesterday and was a little overshadowed by the WASDE report. But before we get into both of those, let's turn over to the grain hedge trading platform and see where we closed off the day. Corn trading down 3/4 cent, soybeans down 8.5 cents to 9.41 on the July contract, and July wheat here down 8.25 to 5.05 cents. One thing to keep in mind is that early this morning we did have CONAB, which is the Brazilian government forecasting agency. They raised their forecast for the 14-15 corn crop to 80.21 million metric tons. That's up from 78.59 million metric tons in their previous forecast. Basically what they're seeing is the second corn crop here now expecting to be 49.38 million metric tons. That was up from their previous forecast of 47.89 million metric tons. They're also increasing their soybean crop expectations to 96.04 million metric tons. This kind of falls into the theme of the fact that South America continues to have a good growing season. They had good production in their first crop, and it looks as though it just seems as though these forecasts keep coming out. We keep seeing an increase in South American production that weighs on the markets here going forward. One thing to keep in mind, we'll talk a little bit about ethanol production now. This came out yesterday. Basically what we noticed is that ethanol production jumped 20,000 barrels per day last week. We saw that move up to 992,000 barrels per day. Keep in mind that is the largest production here since December. So you'll notice on the chart off to the left here, the weekly ethanol production here had been slowly declining really since that December time period, really into late April. Once May came around, we started to see a pickup in ethanol production again. The last 4 weeks have been phenomenal, well over the 2013 average, well over the 4-year average. So very strong ethanol production weekly here. But this is kind of interesting because on the WASDE report yesterday, we did see ethanol production decline by 25 million bushels. That helped increase ending stocks for old crop corn production, or old crop corn ending stocks. One thing that also came out this morning that we should talk about is export sales. You'll notice export sales for corn came in within analyst expectations for old crop, booking 495,000 metric tons. That was in between the 400 to 600,000 metric tons expected by analysts. Soybeans was actually on the high side. It beat analyst expectations, which range from 50 to 150,000 metric tons. We saw weekly export sales of 164,000 metric tons for soybeans. Another good sale this week. This is a time when we typically see either cancellations or very small export sales, but yet we continue to see export sales, at least 100,000 or more, it seems, in the second half of this marketing season. So it's been very strong. One thing we did see reflected in the last WASDE report yesterday was an increase in export sales by 10 million bushels. When you look at wheat, you'll notice that wheat here came in at 106,000 metric tons of cancellations this week. Analysts were expecting anywhere between 300 to 100,000 metric tons of cancellations. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that basically when you look at new crop sales, we'll talk about this later on, that was the end of the old crop wheat, of the old crop export sales of really the marketing year. We saw the end of the marketing year at May 31st. The beginning of the new marketing year, 15-16, is June 1st. And so what we saw there for either what you would consider new crop sales was basically a carryover of 576,100 metric tons carried over from last year onto this year's books. We did see new sales of 376,700 in this week's export sales. One thing I did want to show you a little bit is the chart here for corn export sales. You'll notice we are on par, on pace to meet USDA expectations. This week we had cumulative export sales for corn of 43.9 million metric tons. That is down from last year. That we had a pace of 46.5 million metric tons at this time of the year, but we are ahead of the pace needed to meet USDA expectations, but not by a whole lot. only about 1 million metric tons. So that's something to keep in mind. Soybeans, completely different story. We're well ahead of the pace needed to meet expectations. We're also ahead of last year's pace. We've booked 50.2 million metric tons, really what we would expect to need, taking into account seasonality during this time, is 48.2 million metric tons. So we are ahead of pace there for export sales. It continues to be a positive demand source for soybeans. When you look at new crop sales, that's one thing I want to focus on. New crop sales came in for corn, coming in within analyst expectations, but for soybeans, again, new crop sales beat analyst expectations, booking 389,000 metric tons over the 100 to 250,000 metric tons of expectations. Wheat here, as we talked about, booking 943,000 metric tons. That was primarily made up of sales that were pushed onto new crop books here. So that pretty much wraps up today's show. If you have any questions about what we talked about, please give the office a call. Number is 877-472-4607. If you haven't done so already, take a demo of that 14-day free trial at grainhedge.com. See what it's like to have live quotes in the palm of your hands, be able to place trades on your mobile phone, be able to execute hedges when the opportunities arise. They're not always going to wait for you to be back at the desk. And so it's a great tool to add to your marketing toolbox. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll see you here Friday for the weekly wrap-up.